Okay, sorry about that. We had an interruption from the terriers. So I wanted to go back and talk about next invention. And invention is simply when you have an argument and the word invention refers to proof. So we look back, way back at Aristotle talking about rhetoric, the art of logical argument, and we want to look at invention. Invention is just providing proof for your argument, which is the kind of work we're doing with our writing for this semester. So the two kinds of proof, there's artificial proof, which is where you have to embellish, so rhetoric, rhetorical appeals, and then inartificial proof, which is the organic stuff, the evidence, hard data, facts. Those are the things that you want to put in for proof. So one of the things that I talked about, Matthew Parfit book, Writing and Response, he goes a little bit more into detail than any of the OER material at this point in talking about invention. So invention is ways to think about how do you get your brain flowing to come up with a topic worth proving. What's your thesis? How do we invent? How do we come up with that argument? So one way to do it is to think about what is a problem? What are some problems? So that free association of ideas. One way to do that is to free write. Just sit down and just write. I'm going to just write all these ideas, and then I'm going to look for connections. And then I'm going to map out. So another way to look about it is to map it. So mapping, you can put a map where you're doing a diagram. So look at connections between ideas in your mapping or diagram. Remember the Venn diagrams from, oh God, back in the day. So if you think of things like that, sorry, it's really bad. This middle point right in here where they overlap, that's where you want to look at. What's really interesting about how these ideas come together. Another way to think about invention is to a diagram. So not just mapping, but diagramming, connecting ideas through threads and things. Look for your strongest or the most interesting elements of ideas. Another thing, posing questions. I love to pose questions because that's what you're trying to resolve. So the more questions you have, the more you have to think about something, to press harder on, to think deeper about. The more you think about it, the more questions should be generated, and that's when you get the best, the meatiest, the most relevant arguments to prove. So thinking about the Parfit book, he talks about posing questions and playing with knots, like a knot that you would tie that can be worked out. But a knot has to be thought about. You have to really work it to come up with some ideas. So he's talking about keep moving forward, entertaining questions and knots. He says, however silly or inappropriate they may seem, use them as engines of exploration. Dwell on knots. Stay for as long as possible with the knots that you come across. Anything that's puzzling or interesting. Do what you can with them, and one may lead to another, or begin to change its appearance as you dwell on it. And this is from page 99 of the second edition of Writing in Response. And I really like the way he talks about that, spending time with something that is puzzling. Because if you just go over something too easily, think about your so what for your audience. You won't give them something that they have to think about and knot their way through or untangle their way through. So that's a way to think about invention. I want to go back to, if you still have the Inquiry to Academic Writing textbook, there is a really useful discussion about invention and making connections in invention and developing ideas. One of the things that I really like is to do the free writing and to do the mapping. You're looking at ideas to spur curiosity in your readers, so that you keep your reader asking questions and you keep yourself asking questions. So that's all we're going to talk about for this week. Let me know if you have any questions, if you need anything clarified. I'm sorry for the dogs interrupting us, so we'll make sure we get this all together, and I hope you have a really good week.